person who usually got them was to like a widow or descendants, and that was kind of part of what it was for, was to kind of help them out in kind of a pension, like a pension. And so Congress would they were promised land instead of money, because the government didn't have the money to pay them. So basically what so to make good on the promises, they usually wait 20 or 25 years or 30, and then so it usually went to the widow, who frequently she had the right to immediately sell that, which she did, and then just use the money for like a pension. And so he purchased this land, which was populated primarily by, and it was supposedly a set-aside for Virginia soldiers in the American Revolution. And at any rate, so we think that they came from Virginia, but it hasn't been proven. And so our descendant, Richard King, was a child of this fellow, and they later migrated from Ohio to Marshall, Illinois, which is approximately right in the middle of Illinois. And then from there, they didn't stay long there, and then they went out to the area just southeast of Springfield, Missouri. And they basically lived along the river that the Whitewater River, famous Whitewater River that the Bill and Clinton invested in. But they lived up above in the Missouri part of it, and it flows south into Arkansas. And but it was kind of along the White River. Flat Creek was their address, and that flowed into that. And anyway, all these locations were documented in the census. They were out there for about 30 years, actually, and they were documented in several censuses out there. And then Civil War came along, and they completed the war years were spent still in Missouri. And we have one family member that was a member of the Union Army as a reserve soldier, and at any rate, he didn't see any battle type action, but he was documented as a part of the Missouri militia, which was part of the Union Army. And following that, they went a couple hundred miles west out into Kansas, and he purchased a property there. It was not a homestead, and they lived there for just a few years. And I guess they didn't like it there, but they raised cattle, and some of the granddad talked about herding cattle into the Indian Territory, because Oklahoma they lived right on what's now the Oklahoma line, but it was the Indian Territory. And the Indian Territory, the line was a little bit north of where the Oklahoma line is now. At any rate, that was something I remember him mentioning a time or two. So his preteen years, some of them were spent in Kansas, and then following that, they moved out to Idaho, which they went to Idaho by immigrant train, and put all their cattle in boxcars and their farm equipment, and they ended up in Pullman for a while, and then they apparently a decision was made to get a homestead. And while they were surveying the properties for homesteads over near Moscow, Idaho, they spent some time in Pullman, and then they moved to the homestead where we'll be visiting tomorrow. And so they spent about 10 years on Bear Ridge between Deary and Kendrick, Idaho. And those were the years where Granddad and Uncle Charlie were early students at the University of Idaho in Moscow and attended mostly their prep school there. And then I found some documentation that Uncle Charlie was on the track team, and they had he appears in one of the football photographs. And so at any rate, we have them that far. And then they decided to go to California, so they went with another one of the Galloway family members, and they went down the Columbia River on the steamer from out of Lewiston, Portland, and then they got on a train and went south to Kingsburg, California, in Delano County, and began farming down there. There was some irrigated farming that was started from Sacramento River irrigation project, and so they went down there to try their luck there. And then Uncle Jeff got malaria, and the decision was made to go back to Idaho. So they came back up, and I think they spent some time in Lewiston, and then Granddad made a deal in that place in Sweetwater, and they moved over to Sweetwater, Idaho, which is near Lewiston, and spent a number of the years there, which took them through World War I, the World War I years. And then they moved on to Chewelah in 1924, I believe it was, and they spent family was there for. Some were there for more like 50 years, you know. So at any rate, this kind of gives a visual path of our family crossing the United States, and I have their documented census every 10 years where they were all this time.
Do you have any idea why they moved up to Chewelah?
Well, I really don't, Dad. Do you remember what prompted Dad to leave the Sweetwater place and move to Chewelah?
Move on now.
Do you remember exactly why he left the Sweetwater place, got to Sweetwater, and moved to Chewelah?
I think it's just because it's hard to make a living down here.
Okay.
It was a hillside farm that was so steep that you couldn't use a wagon, or you'd have to move the hay on slips and so forth. It was just so doggone steep that I don't know why he ever bought it. But
Yeah.
if he'd been a drinking man, I thought he'd had too many shots when he bought it.
Yeah.
He wasn't. But I think the grandma and grandpa had moved to Clarkson, and I think they wanted to be near grandpa and grandma because grandpa was certainly having trouble with his eyesight and so forth about then, and I think they wanted to be fairly close to them. And apparently this was probably cheap and available. And also there was work in the warehouses, the grain warehouses during the harvest every year. They worked in grain warehouses. So that was another source of income.
Yeah. Well, at any rate, the move from Delano County was necessary, but that property down there, Delano County has sometimes been the #1 agricultural county in the United States. So I'm not sure they would have made a fortune down there, but they probably would have made it done a little better than they did on the farm in Sweetwater in particular. At any rate, I've recently found too that this property that they had in Kansas, about 30 years later, they discovered oil and gas just south of there. And recently a guy wrote a book about it, And at any rate, the county just on the Oklahoma side, they had an oil rush there about the end of World War I. And the Model T had come on for getting close to 10 years. Demand for oil was, gaining ground all the time, more and more engines. And so this Osage County, Oklahoma, became they had literally an oil rush down there. And it's where Phillips 66 got their first oil. And also Skelly, Sinclair, and Getty Oil, which was the old Flying A oil gasoline station. Their initial finds that set them up in business were found, and I don't believe that their Kansas property ever had any oil on it or natural gas. Not that I have been able to determine, but there are some oil fields up in that southeast corner. So they got close. They got close, but they didn't quite make it in the big time in any of these moves. But you got to give them some credit for trying, and everybody else was too. There was always an economic incentive to make one of those moves, and it was just one of the kind of part of the American character was try to always do a little bit better than the next generation. Always trying to do a little bit better than they did
And I knew that was wrong.
the generation before. So that was part of that, and the fact that a lot more people were engaged in agriculture then, so you needed land, and so the portions of the farmable land would get pretty well filled up in the eastern part, and so people just flowed west and would take big chances. And most of them did not gain very much, but a few did once in a while. But the acquisitiveness came kind of along with the move to America too. I found that the one Irish line of the family I've done quite a bit of research on, and a lot of the Irish priests would come over, and I'm familiar with a bunch of them that came into northeast Kansas, where this family ended up for quite a while. When the Homestead Act came out, they encouraged all the Irish communities to take homesteads and take a chance, because after the Civil War, they would tell the congregations, well, after the Civil War, what are they going to do with all these freed blacks? They're going to come north and be competing with you for labor jobs, so you might as well go out and get some free land and try your hand at farming. And so a lot of them did, and at any rate, many of the priests would mention that they had noticed quite a difference in the acquisitiveness and the interest in gaining material life that seemed to come along with the venturing American spirit, and it wasn't as obvious in Ireland, but that just seemed to kind of come along with the coming to the land that was new to us anyway. So at any rate, we have all the names listed, and some of the family, some of the children of this guy, who he had quite a large group of children, and most of them we've lost track of, and most of them did venture on west at one point or another. A few of them may still live in Ohio, this isn't too far from Columbus, Ohio, and but some of them went to, additional ones went to Missouri. Some of them went down into Texas, and that group, a lot of them lived around Norman. They didn't last too long in Texas, but they relocated around Norman, Oklahoma, and so they stayed there for quite a while, and some of them I know are living in California. And then another guy from this original family that he came west earlier on, but he was actually on the Oregon Trail. And I documented that because the guy, there was just a huge mass of people that came on the Oregon Trail in those years. So there was an Indian agent in Umatilla, Oregon, that he set up a deal to have anybody that came by every day, he'd have them sign this chart. And like in August 3rd, 1850 something, it was around 1850 because it was like right after the California gold rush, which was in 1849. So it was like 1850, the following summer. This guy came out and he signed that document at the Umatilla Indian Agency in Umatilla, Oregon. And his name was Henry Harrison King, which was not too common. And he ended up in Coos Bay, first in Coos Bay, Oregon, and then he happened to be a medical doctor at that time. He had at least the doctor training that he had, which must have been pretty primitive because, so we're talking 1853, you see. So doctoring was just kind of what they could do, and but he wanted to do that more than he wanted to farm but he ended up in Coos Bay, which was kind of a hot spot at that time because they could send lumber by ships down to San Francisco. And then, at any rate, he was also, I found some documentation of him. He served in an Oregon militia during the Umpqua Indian War, and I got those documents, and his job was as a military surgeon, and I can only imagine what kind of surgery he performed, but he did the best he could. So, and then he ended up coming back from Coos Bay up to the area around Albany, Oregon, near where the University of Oregon is, and Oregon State. And at any rate, he ran a little store there for a while and did his doctoring, as needed. And then he's buried in the town of Scioto, Oregon. And I actually coincidentally found a co-worker that lived near, or they had grown up, and so they went home for Thanksgiving one time, and I told them that they lived right near the cemetery where he was buried. So I had him snap a picture. I've got a picture of his gravestone, and it does say Dr. Henry Harrison King, or Henry Harrison King, medical doctor. So that's kind of a cool part of this original family.
Was he one of the 12 children?
Yeah, he was one of the older ones. Well, kind of in the middle, I guess. Yeah, Henry Harrison King. So that was a pretty bold move in 1850 to go all the way across. And they had although Coos Bay was a pretty hot spot, but it was land. I mean, there was no. Other than there was shipping in and out of there a lot. They traveled a lot up and down the coast. There's a lot more going on down the coast. But if you got inland any distance, there was just trails. There wasn't even anything we'd call roads. It was primitive. And the original, a lot of the Oregon Trail people really suffered quite a bit, and they ran out of clothing. They had to cover dress like Indians because there was no finished goods coming in except maybe once a year or whatever. By ship they'd come around, and they had a hard time, a lot of them, and so you got to give them credit for putting up with a hard lifestyle in the pursuit of a better life. At any rate, it's a fairly typical American story. There was people in the thousands that kind of followed the same general hopscotching across the United States. There's nothing too unique about that, but it has been kind of an interesting hobby to pursue, and I've had quite a bit of help from Dad, and other family members have been pretty cooperative, and I've gotten to know some interesting people. And we've gotten to know some members of the associated families like the Galloways. It gives you an excuse to keep in touch with people. In this modern life, it seems like you need an excuse to keep in touch. So, but it's done that, quite a few of the names I haven't. Of the family, they're out there somewhere, but where I don't know. One of Henry Harrison King's descendants I did connect with, and I have some material on them, and one of the guys became a history professor. He taught mostly at Tacoma Community College and Seattle University, but he wasn't, the American West wasn't his specialty. He was kind of a specialist in the Soviet Union. Was his real interest, but he actually wrote some books on a commission basis, some local histories over around Tacoma, and some of the histories of the waterfront in Tacoma and Seattle, and then he wrote a history of the Japanese community in Pierce County, Washington, and he's still alive, and it's been kind of fun getting to know him a little bit because he has such a love of history, and he attended the University of Idaho, and basically his mother also did genealogy, and I connected with her, and she provided some of the basic information that's going into my collection of documents, and I've checked everything she did, and there were never any mistakes on any of her work. So I know it's all pretty accurate.
What was his name? What was the fellow's name?
This guy's name is Magnet. Ron Magnet, and but he's a descendant of Henry Harrison King, and Henry Harrison King was one of his daughters, who was 6'2". And some of them back then the family was taller back then. they really were. Taller. And but they took some risks, and he saw the hard side of the farm life and decided that he didn't want to spend his life farming either. So he became a school teacher, and initially taught high school, and then taught at the community college, and then he got his PhD from the University of Washington, and spent some time at Seattle University teaching also. Some pretty interesting people, It's been kind of fun.
Yeah. Thank you.